Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 42.5 of the Darklivity podcast. This is a continuation of last week's episode on Ashley Benefield. And before I get started, I just want to give you a short but very important message. I don't usually have to say this, but in our last video, we were very surprised at some of the comments that we were seeing. So please, whether it is on this channel or any other creator's channel, remember that we're human. Before you write something, just take a second and step back and remember that we're in this together. We're not perfect. And for us personally, we're not here to hurt anyone. I understand this case did have a slight political aspect to it that we only mention because it is part of the case. It is the factual part of this case. It's not to make a statement of any kind either way. So I do want to apologize if that hurt anyone, since I know it's a very emotional time right now. So please also remember that many people read the comments, not just us. And we love being part of this community. And we hope that it will continue to be a safe place to have mature, open, and positive conversations. So now for part 2, which is finally where you'll get to hear all the things that will make everything in part 1 make a lot more sense. That's another thing. I think it's tough because we hadn't talked about everything. It wasn't revealed yet. And I want to make sure that you know that we know that Doug is the victim in this case. That is clear to us, and we want to make it abundantly clear. Sometimes we do have what's known as an imperfect victim. I mean, nobody is perfect, but that label is used to say that a person has aspects that some might find to be negative. And we would be doing a disservice if we failed to be transparent and tell you all of those things. So I hope you do understand that. Now let's get into part 2.
So this is what I texted my dad that morning because he didn't answer. So immediate gut feeling, I knew something was wrong because that was so not normal. And then my uncle called me and he was like, "Hey, Eva, we have some bad news." And I was like, "He's dead, isn't he?" And they were like, "How did you know?" And I was like, "I just had a gut feeling. Did she kill him?" And he was like, "Yeah, Ashley shot and killed him." And so I kind of just drove to my friend's house after that, and I sat down on his porch, and all my friends were there, and I looked at them and was like, "So Ashley killed my dad?" And they were like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do with you?" And I was like, "I don't know, I don't have parents anymore."
All I could think about when I saw that was how bad I felt for Eva. And you can tell she does a great job repressing her feelings because she is definitely hurting. And telling her story probably helps her. And she told you everything that we have. But she even showed you text messages. And I was like, wow. And I'm going to put some of them up on the screen. Eva texted her dad, "Good morning." And then after she didn't hear anything back, she's like, "Hello, you're scaring me." And then she said, "Our phones were shut off again." Then Eva texts, "You should definitely text me so I know you're okay." And still she heard nothing from Doug. So she texted, "I'm about to text Ashley." Then she said, "Just kidding, I don't have her number." And then Eva said, "You're freaking me out." All of a sudden, her text went green, which is a sign on an iPhone that it's disconnected or it has died. And Eva still tried texting saying, "Please answer," and that she just hates this so much. I cannot imagine that fear. And the way that she's like, "He's dead, isn't he?" That was so scary. It's like she knew it was coming. She wasn't shocked. And then she even said Ashley killed him. Like she knew. And Ashley this whole time figured that everything was over because Doug was dead.
Right.
And that she could now move on with her life.
But now everything changed on November 4th when investigators issued an arrest warrant for Ashley. They believed that she had exhausted all legal means of keeping her child and saw murder as her last option, not an escape plan with a rental car and a burner phone. Ashley was charged with second-degree murder with a firearm. And later, the state argued that Ashley's motive for killing Doug was to keep her child away from him. Having already gone through the courts and lost, with the judge ruling against her, the state claimed Ashley saw Doug as the problem and took matters into her own hands to eliminate him.
She ended up going to jail for 17 days, but she did get out on bond, and then she was put on house arrest, and she lived back with her mom while she was awaiting her trial. Now, meanwhile, Ashley's attorney filed what's called a motion for a stand your ground hearing. This is a doctrine of affirmative defense to a murder charge. The stand your ground law is a legal doctrine in some states, including Florida, and this law allows a person to use force, including deadly force, in self-defense without the duty to retreat if they believe that that force is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to themselves or to others. What are the first things I thought of when I heard this? Well, that she probably moved to Florida to have lenient laws. I mean, obviously she's from Florida, so maybe not. But I know from being from Florida that they are very lenient on it. Like if someone comes into your house, I mean, you can read about it. But that's just what popped into my head. I was like, oh, convenient that she's in Florida and they have a stand your ground law, you know? The defense essentially argued that Ashley was justified in using lethal force and should not be prosecuted for her actions. The court actually held a hearing to determine if the stand your ground law applied to Ashley's case. The judge ultimately denied this motion, meaning that Ashley was not getting off that easily. And after a number of delays, she finally went to trial on July 23rd, 2024. So just a few months ago.
During the opening statements, each side laid out its version of events, painting contrasting pictures of what led to Doug's death. The story included the whirlwind romance, Doug's vasectomy reversal, the rapid pregnancy, Ashley's decision to leave the marriage, and her focusing on starting her new ballet academy, which was allegedly her lifelong dream.
The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Suzanne O'Donnell, told the jury that the day Ashley became pregnant, she knew that she wanted to be a single mother and raise her baby alone. She explained how Ashley used her morning sickness as an excuse to return to Florida and allow her mother to take care of her. I'm kind of like, take care of her, doing air quotes. But her true intention was to leave her husband and that Doug and Ashley never lived together again after she returned to Florida, which was Ashley's choice. And about the allegations Ashley had made, including that she was allegedly being poisoned, all in an effort to deprive Doug of a relationship with his child and to raise her child alone. Jon is going to tell you what the defense argued, and I just want to say right now, if his voice sounds familiar, I'm talking about the defense attorney, not your voice, babe. When we play it for you, it's because he sounds exactly like Mike from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. If you don't know who Mike is, we're going to put him up on the screen for you if you're watching. The entire time I watched this trial, every time I heard the defense attorney, I thought of that guy. And I couldn't get it out of my head.
I can hear it. Defense attorney Neil Taylor argued to the jury that Ashley was a young woman who became ensnared in a web of an older man who manipulated and mistreated her. He stated, Doug was 30 years older than Ashley. He was obsessed with her and successfully portrayed himself as someone he was not in an effort to win her hand in marriage. Despite promoting himself as a religious, honorable, and decent human being, Doug Benefield was a manipulative, cunning, and abusive man who absolutely insisted on control. Neil Taylor further argued that Doug had a history of violent and threatening behavior towards Ashley. He reminded the jury that Doug had previously shot through the kitchen ceiling to silence her, thrown a loaded gun at her, punched their dog in the face, and regularly carried a concealed firearm that was always ready to fire. Taylor claimed that on September 27th, as Doug was helping Ashley pack for their move to Maryland, his threats and intimidation escalated into violence. He explained that the two were arguing over how to pack, and according to Ashley, Doug assaulted her with a moving box, leaving a mark on her side. However, let's not forget that in the police report, a witness claimed that that box incident actually happened a day before, as Doug had been there all week helping to move their belongings. Additionally, when investigators took photographs of that scratch on Ashley's side, it appeared to be older. The scratch wasn't bleeding and it didn't look like it had occurred within the last few hours. Ashley claimed that when she asked Doug to leave, he hit her in the head, prompting her to run into the bedroom. She alleged that Doug followed her, standing at the door and trapping her inside. According to Ashley, he then came at her in a threatening manner. In her version of events, Ashley grabbed a gun that she said was lying in a basket in the closet of the room.
Another very convenient part of this puzzle is that the gun just happened to be in the room where she's trapped.
Right, and I mean, this is an empty bedroom. How is that so happen that a firearm ready to go is just there?
Not just one firearm. There were two in that bedroom. So that to me, I don't know. It just looks strange. And it's in a spot where, you know, a toddler that's living there could get to it. I mean, they climb. And these were like, we're going to show them on the screen, but they're like kind of those wire shelves, those cheap wire ones you get from like Home Depot. We've had them before, but it's like toddlers can climb up that.
Oh, yeah.
So to have a gun just lying around, I mean, we're lucky that nothing else happened.
And despite this, Ashley stated that she managed to shoot Doug twice, which, given her target practice history, may have helped her aim. First of all, there was no mark on her head, so that made her version of events come into question, but the defense ended his statements by telling the jury, quote, "The only thing that is going to have been established here beyond a reasonable doubt is that Douglas Benefield was a violent abuser. Ashley Benefield's effort to placate him was absolutely consistent with what abused women do, especially when a child is involved, and that Ashley's result and resource to use deadly force was justified under the circumstances."
Of course, we do not have time to rehash this entire trial for you, but that's why we do these videos, because we're going to wrap everything up in a big bow for you so you understand the gist of everything that happened at the trial. And then you can make your own decisions and your thoughts about the entire case, which we would love for you to discuss in the comments. So here are some important aspects. Doug's cousin and best friend, Tommy Benefield, testified, and he said that Doug was enamored with Ashley. She became his whole world, and he prioritized her over everyone and everything else in his life. Eva, Doug's daughter, told the jury, quote, "They were just with each other all the time. It was very lovey-dovey. They were very touchy-feely PDAs. Any event with school or extracurricular that I was in, they were together and they never left each other's side," end quote. She told the jury that she was told that Ashley was just a girlfriend, but 2 days later, Doug told her that he wanted her to come downstairs for a talk. Eva declined at first. She said, unless it's something more serious, like they were getting engaged, she didn't feel the need to interact with her father's new girlfriend. And that is when Doug told Eva that they were actually already married. A few months later, when they told Eva that Ashley was pregnant, she stated, quote, "This is bullshit," referring to the situation. So Eva is pretty upset about everything. And here are some additional details about things that we already told you about.
After moving to Florida, Ashley contacted Doug's daughter Eva and tried to convince her that Doug had killed her mother. She also called CPS in South Carolina, launching an investigation by alleging that Eva was in danger. Doug's attorney believed Ashley was attempting to manipulate the grieving 15-year-old daughter to support her claims of mistreatment, which could be used in her custody case over Emerson. Ultimately, Doug was cleared of all allegations during the investigation. Ashley signed herself and her daughter up for 26 consecutive days of treatment in a hyperbaric chamber, claiming it would detoxify them from the heavy metals and other toxins. Together, Ashley and Emerson spent over 40 hours in the chamber. In March 2020, Doug wrote a letter to the sheriff's office accusing Ashley of having a split personality. Yet months later, Doug surprised everyone by announcing to his friends, family, and attorney that he and Ashley were planning to reconcile and relocate to Maryland as a family. He shared this excitement with Eva and his cousin Tommy, saying that he was optimistic about the fresh start and that everything seemed to be going well.
As for the prosecution's witnesses, Doug's attorney, Stephanie Murphy, this is from before he was killed, the one that was handling all of the custody, battle, information, emotions, and stuff, told the jury that during their 11-month period of reconciliation, she would see photos of Doug and Ashley in local magazines and newspaper articles for charity fundraisers and political events, looking like a happy couple again. She assumed that they had resolved all of their issues. Murphy told the jury that Ashley then ghosted him and stopped responding around the time they were supposed to be moving back in together. Doug believed that Ashley was dating other men. And like we told you, that is when he asked Murphy to officially file for divorce from Ashley. That's when Ashley began making these allegations that Doug was physically mistreating their young daughter. Ashley had started documenting injuries to Emerson, including marks and bruises. She even filed for another injunction. However, previously, the two had mutually agreed to undergo a psychological evaluation. And the results of those assessments were supposed to be revealed during the next custody hearing, which was set for September 30th, 2020, which was just 3 days after Doug was shot. Is that a coincidence? He said she had split personalities, so it's just interesting.
The prosecution argued that the upcoming hearing served as Ashley's motive to shoot Doug. They alleged that Ashley likely feared losing custody of her child, especially given the deciding judge's unfavorable view of her, as evidenced by the prior ruling where the judge had called Ashley a liar. and minimize the abuse Doug had admitted to. However, Ashley's family law attorney testified about email messages sent to the court clerk, which revealed that the hearing was focused on a new motion for an injunction and not custody. This testimony undermined the prosecution's claims about Ashley's motive, casting doubt on their narrative.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I remember that during the trial, they were making a really big deal about the dates. They were like, okay, look what's coming up, like we just kind of alluded to. But then in reality, when everything was kind of uncovered, it didn't look like a plausible motive because they weren't going to be talking about custody at all. And that was like all mapped out. And actually, I think even the date was going to change and things are kind of up in the air. So that kind of lost its weight as an argument.
And Ashley's mother testified that in the 3 years that they lived together after the shooting, Ashley never once spoke to her about the incident.
I don't know. I found that really odd. This is someone you're very close to. You mean to tell me you've never discussed that? I mean, this is what her mom's saying when they ask, what did Ashley tell you about the incident? Oh, we never talked about it.
And then on cross-examination, Ashley's mother clarified why she went to the park that evening, which helped address suspicions that she might have purposely avoided the home during the shooting. She explained that she and Emerson went to the park several times a week, as it was just about 5 minutes away in their neighborhood. Since it was too hot to go during the day, they typically waited until the evening when the weather cooled. She said that on that evening in question, they were in the process of leaving when Doug pulled up around 5 p.m. or so. Detective Brian Moreland from the Manatee County Department of Crimes Against Children testified that between December 2019 and April 2020, he had received 5 complaints alleging physical mistreatment by Doug Benefield involving his 2-year-old daughter Emerson. However, after thorough investigation, all of these complaints were unfounded. Detective Chris Gillum, a DV specialist, testified to provide insight into Doug's side of the story. He explained to the jury that his first interaction with Ashley occurred in December of 2017, when she reported that her husband Doug had violated an injunction from South Carolina. Starting in February 2018, Ashley began contacting him regularly, often reaching out 3 times a week. She persistently asked for updates, but her primary focus was on when Doug would be arrested for allegedly violating the restraining order. The supposed violation stemmed from Doug sending Ashley a tea set, which she claimed breached the no-contact terms of the injunction from 3 states away. And in May of 2018, Ashley escalated her demands, insisting that Detective Gillum arrest Doug in the courtroom in front of a judge during a hearing on another injunction that Ashley had filed in Florida. Gillum testified that he remembered this incident clearly because it was the first and only time someone had ever demanded an arrest in person sitting in front of a judge. He tried to explain to Ashley that this was neither possible nor proper procedure, but she continued to insist. Then Ashley became hysterical and began screeching that she couldn't believe how he would allow Doug to kill her and her baby. She went on screeching, "I'll do anything I have to keep my baby." He told the jury that he saw Ashley's behavior as irrational and manipulative.
And we're going to actually listen to him saying this so you can really get the feel for how this detective felt about her.
Did you become familiar at some point with someone named Ashley Benefield?
I did.
And when was that?
December of 2017.
Okay. Generally, what were the circumstances, without it getting into a lot of detail?
She reported that her husband violated an injunction that was in place out of South Carolina.
How many times would you say you spoke to Ashley?
I think a fair number would be 30 to 40.
Okay. And generally speaking, was that because you were contacting her or she was contacting you?
No, she started contacting me on a regular basis beginning around February of 2018.
And what was she contacting you about?
She was wanting to know the status of the case and when Doug would be getting arrested for the violation of the injunction.
Okay. And what did you tell her?
That the case was still suspended at that point, and when I had an answer for her, I would let her know.
Okay. Did she continue to call?
Yes, repeatedly, twice a week at least.
And speak to you personally?
Yes.
And what was her comments? What were her concerns?
It was the same thing. When was Doug going to be arrested for violating the injunction?
Had you ever told her that he was going to be arrested?
I did not.
Okay. And what was her reaction to that?
She was upset that he was not being arrested.
At some point, did you speak to Ashley Benefield again, and she told you about a court hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately when was that conversation?
Around the first week of May 2018. She just got right into the phone call and requested that I arrest Doug for a hearing that was coming up in Manatee County. And she asked for me to arrest Doug when he came inside the courtroom in front of the presiding judge.
Okay. And what was your reaction to that?
That absolutely would not occur.
Okay. And how did she take that?
She was upset. And at that point, I would call it a dramatic cry, hysterical cry, started happening. And I'm still informing her, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to arrest him in the courtroom. And she made a comment, something to the effect of, if the judge sees you arrest him, this will help me keep my baby. So I thought that was a pretty bold statement. And I'm like, I'm still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. She just gave birth. Maybe she's confused. And I'm trying to explain to her gently, that's just not going to happen, especially not going to happen for a judge to see to help you in a civil matter.
And did you, in fact, explain all that to her?
Yes, I did.
And how did she react?
We went back and forth 5 minutes or so. Her just kept requesting to arrest him. I said, this is not going to happen. And her tone turned from the crying to very aggressive, and she says, you will effing arrest him in front of the judge, and I will make sure you do it.
On one hand, it's hard because there are women who legitimately have issues with a partner, and then they do ask for help again and again, and no one does anything. But then there are times when someone is using the system for their own benefit when things are not warranted. And it can be hard to tell the difference in these situations. Oh, wow. I cannot believe that she got so aggressive with this cop. Almost like guilt tripping him about how he's letting Doug kill her and the baby, and then even yelling at him. And then we hear from Dr. Brad Broder. He conducted the psychological evaluations of Doug and Ashley in 2020. He told the jury that he met the couple over the summer of 2020, and sometimes he saw the couple together, and other times he saw them individually. He said that whenever Ashley was in Doug's presence, she would defer to whatever he would say about reconciling their marriage and moving to Maryland together, kind of going with the flow. Or it could be something else.
At first, it seemed like Ashley was hesitant to express how she truly felt about Doug. Initially, Doug had agreed to move to Maryland and live in his own residence under the expectation that Ashley and Emerson would eventually join him.
Exactly. But when Ashley met with Dr. Broder separately, she clearly would make it very apparent she did not want to continue a relationship with Doug at all. So it wasn't out of fear that she was being quiet. It appeared that she was kind of like lying by omission, letting Doug believe one thing as she planned for something completely different. Because she told the doctor that she was frustrated with the law enforcement officers and the family court system. And she told him she felt like her life was in shambles. And Doug's only interest in their daughter was to use her to control Ashley and coerce her back into a controlling relationship with him again and again. Dr. Broder admitted that he thought Ashley would take matters into her own hands, but what he meant was that she would flee with Emerson to Maryland, hoping that law enforcement and the courts would be easier to deal with there, which was code for her getting sole custody and removing Doug from her and her child's life. But Dr. Broder also told the jury that he didn't believe Ashley was prone to angry outbursts, and he even thought she was a good mother, which she probably was, because I don't think her being kind to her daughter or being a good mother to her daughter equals her being bad to her partner.
Right.
We can tell that she loves and that she wanted her daughter, and apparently she was willing to kill for her as well. The prosecution believed that the custody battle wasn't going to stop Ashley from winning, even if it meant manufacturing a time and a circumstance to shoot Doug and claim self-defense. After the prosecution rested their case in chief, the defense put Ashley on the stand for over 4 hours. Now, we can't possibly tell you everything Ashley said, but we will provide the highlights.
Ashley told the jury that she was born in Corpus Christi, Texas, and raised in Annapolis, Maryland. She was raised with character-based values, including kindness, compassion, empathy, honesty, hard work, and accountability. Her father was a Naval Academy graduate and a naval pilot. He is currently a commercial airline pilot. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was an only child who was doted on by both parents. They supported her dreams of becoming a ballerina. Her hobbies included gardening, painting, drawing, cooking, sculpting, and anything related to the arts. Her most important job to date was being a mom to her and Doug's daughter, Emerson.
Then she explained that she met Doug on August 16th of 2016, and she thought he was confident, passionate, fascinating, and accomplished. She was attracted to his intelligence, charm, and sense of humor. The chemistry was obvious, and they were immediately drawn to each other. Like her father, Doug had been a naval pilot, which she saw as another sign of their compatibility. However, she said that Doug did not turn out to be the man she thought he was. Perhaps this is why we don't recommend marrying someone after just knowing them for 13 days, because how is he the person you thought he was if you don't know him? But the truth is, the two of them wanted to get married so that they could stay within the bounds of their religious beliefs, which is you don't get intimate before you are married. And this is not a good reason to rush into an age gap, power imbalance marriage. And maybe we can chalk it up to impulsiveness, Ashley's youth. She was only 23, right? And it's not an excuse, but it's a reason, right? And unfortunately, we can't say the same for Doug. Occasionally, we have an imperfect victim in a true crime case, and Doug seems to fit into this category, meaning he was not holier than thou, he was not perfect, nobody really is, but he had his own flaws. However, character imperfections should not result in a death sentence.
Ashley went on to tell the jury that soon after marriage, she discovered that Doug was far from perfect. The day of the murder was no different. Ashley will explain why Doug was at her home on the day he was killed.
He came over to help load some of the larger items that my mom and I had kind of pre-staged in the garage into the U-Haul truck.
And were there any discussions between the two of you about the order that these things should be placed in the back of the truck?
Yes, we had discussed that my things would be going in last, right at the front, so they would be easy to get out first. At one point, he had me help him load one of the larger pieces into the back of the U-Haul truck. And when I was up in the truck with him, I realized that everything had been all like mixed together and it was no longer separated. And I pointed that out to him, and he got really offended and upset. He said, "It shouldn't be your stuff, my stuff, your house, my house."
Was there a particular demand he made at that time?
He said I needed to start acting like a wife.
Ashley claimed that she attempted to change the subject to calm Doug down and de-escalate any potential conflict. She said she often felt on edge around him, never knowing when he might lash out. According to Ashley, she suggested that they wrap things up and finish another day to diffuse the tension, but that's when Doug allegedly became physical with her.
Ashley, would you tell us if there came a time shortly thereafter where there was physical contact between the two of you?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
We were in the living room, and as he came up to me, instead of walking past me, he walked like right into me, like a body check. He like bumped me.
His shoulder to your shoulder?
Yes.
And describe for us, if you can, the force of the bump.
It caught me off guard. I almost fell. I like stumbled.
How was he acting at that point?
He was clearly hostile. He was mumbling under his breath and was glaring at me.
What was your concern?
I could see that it was escalating, and I didn't want him to blow up at me.
Was there a second instance of physical contact?
Yes.
Tell us about that, please.
We were in the garage, and it was very much like the living room. I had just suggested strongly that I wanted to be done for the day. And he, as he came up to me, he walked right into me. Again, body checked me.
Finally, was there a third instance of contact?
Yes.
What happened?
We were in the hallway, and we were coming opposite directions towards each other, and he had a box. And as he walked up to me, he looked me in the eye, and he drove the corner of the box up into me.
Where?
My side.
Indicating on your right side.
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that the box incident could be true? And we already heard from a witness that it happened, but it
Sure.
happened a different day. But I think she's using that narrative, right? Because it's already happened. And she's using it for the day in question. Because you know how some people mix the truth in to make the story more plausible? And even if it did happen that day, that one scratch leading to killing someone sounds pretty extreme. But let's continue to hear from Ashley.
So at this point, Ashley said she began to feel increasingly threatened. She claimed she apologized to Doug, trying to calm him down because she didn't want the situation to escalate further. However, Doug wasn't in the mood to be placated and told her that he would decide when they were done. Ashley said she ran again, and they ended up in her daughter's bedroom, where Doug allegedly told her to shut the F up, and then proceeded to call her names. She recounted that the last time he said those words to her, he fired a bullet into the kitchen ceiling. Ashley said she was aware that Doug almost always carried a gun and didn't want him to use it for any reason. Considering his prior actions, this part of her story may contain another truth mixed into her narrative.
But that evening, Ashley said that Doug told her he could see right through her, that he knew what she was doing, and that she was being manipulative and trying to get him to leave. He allegedly told Ashley he could stay and he could even spend the night if he wanted to because he was still her husband. Now, if that's true, then it would be frustrating. And it is quite manipulating on his part and controlling because they're clearly not together the way they were before. But again, it seems extreme to kill someone over this. But according to her, she was scared, so she ran. She tried to leave the house, and this is when things get out of control. She said she ran to the front door, but never made it because he grabbed her by the hand, yanked her back, and was now in between her and the door. And he said, "Where the F do you think you're going?" And that's when Ashley said she summoned the courage to tell him that she was done. She was done with this relationship and she wanted him to leave. But I'm thinking, aren't they already done?
Right.
They're not even living together. They're clearly people who have had a rocky relationship pretty much from the beginning. They're not living together. They're supposed to be moving but not living together. But she said she was done playing pretend, that she was done trying to appease him and just to avoid his temper. And Ashley told the jury that Doug said, "You can't fucking leave me." And then he hit her on the side of the head. Ashley said that this was the first time Doug had physically attacked her. And that made all the difference. So let's listen.
What was different at that moment, Ashley, than at any time in your prior relationship with Doug?
He had never actually hit me before.
What did you do?
I ran
Where?
to my room
Why?
because I was scared.
Ashley, did you have anything in your room that could protect you?
I had my gun.
Did you grab the gun?
Yes.
As you're grabbing the gun, what, if anything, did you hear?
I heard the door hitting the doorstop.
As if it is flung open?
Yes.
And what do you see, Ashley, when you look up?
Doug was standing in the doorway. His face was red. Like the veins were bulging in his neck. The way he was looking at me, it didn't even look like Doug. His eyes were black.
Does he yell anything at you?
He said, "You're fucking done."
And what does he do at that point?
I held the gun like in front of me and I said,
stop. And he like turned and he got into this like, it was like a fighting stance. He like, I got low and he started like moving his arms and his hands around. He was making these like jerking motions.
What were you expecting when you were holding the gun out in front of you and you told him to stop?
I thought when he saw it, he would leave.
Did he?
No.
At that point, Ashley, what are you thinking?
I thought he was going to kill me.
Tell us what happens next.
He started coming towards me, and then he lunged at me, and I started pulling the trigger. And he just kept coming. And I remember trying to move to get away from him, but he kept coming at me.
My initial reaction to this was that it wasn't genuine.
There's a lot of sniffing, but I don't see any real tears.
I don't either. It's just sort of like when you go, like
Yeah.
I could do that over and over again, and there's just nothing coming out.
He's unarmed in that moment, but then again, could this be plausible? Sure, she was scared.
Anything could be plausible. I mean, you could even hit someone and it wouldn't leave a mark. Like there's, that's plausible too, that he really did hit her that night. We don't know.
Right, maybe he did hit her. I mean, he has admitted to her in text that he had been pushed to do things he wouldn't normally do, like punch a dog or throw a cat down a flight of stairs.
And we already know his former wife also said in text, he kicked her. I mean, that's pretty intense. So it shows that he can get physical. So yeah, she knows that he's capable of it.
Ashley said even though she was still holding the firearm, she was terrified and trying to get away from him. As she fired, he kept advancing. One of the bullets hit him in the leg and his feet went up in the air like he was losing balance. But Ashley had already squeezed the gun again for a second time. Because he was off balance and in midair, the bullet traveled down his arm and into his chest cavity. Of course, the defense would say that both shots were fired from the front as Doug advanced, but the prosecution tried to argue that the second shot was towards his back while he was fleeing. The fact is that the evidence does suggest that Doug was facing her when she shot him, and losing his balance and falling backward explains how the second bullet lodged in his chest cavity. But that doesn't mean he was advancing or attacking her. He could have just been walking into the room.
Yeah, and who knows? She could have been calling his name like, hey, babe, come here, let me show you something. And that prompted him to come that way. And then when he saw her with a gun, he turned to flee. And that's why mid-second shot, he was like mid-turn.
Right. It's possible the shots happened so quickly and unexpectedly that Doug didn't have time to flee or react. The truth could very well lie somewhere between these two accounts. What complicates things further is that the original medical examiner's report seemed to support Ashley's version of events, while the revised report aligned more closely with the prosecution's theory.
I feel like it's always somewhere in between two truths,
Right.
Like it's somewhere in there. And it's hard because the only people who know exactly what happened are Ashley and Doug. And Doug is not here to tell his version of the story. And Ashley made a very compelling witness. She wasn't overly dramatic. She seemed to be kind of like holding back her tears maybe because we didn't see any tears. So maybe she's like trying to be composed. She looked down the entire time in a very submissive posture as if she was afraid. And it was either sincere or very well rehearsed. Ultimately, it was up to the jury to decide if they bought Ashley's self-serving explanation of events or not. Ashley continued with her narrative, telling the jury that she ran for help when Doug hit the floor. But this is not what witnesses saw, because witnesses testified they saw Ashley running out of her house, carrying her gun and screaming, "He's going to come get me." And she also told the neighbor she was concerned that he was going to come after her and shoot her. The neighbor then called for help, and the EMTs rendered aid. Not in time to save Doug's life, though. Ashley said she was in a panic and had no idea how many times she shot Doug.
Ashley expressed deep regret over what she described as being forced to shoot the father of her child. She told the jury that she felt horrible about the situation and had been living with terrible regret ever since. She also said she suffered from PTSD as a result of the incident. Ashley recounted an earlier example of what she claimed was Doug's controlling and threatening behavior. Shortly after their marriage, she went on a pre-planned cruise with her mother and best friend, a vacation that she had paid for before meeting Doug. While she was away, she said Doug bombarded her with daily text messages, growing angry when he could hear men speaking to her in the background. According to Ashley, Doug even threatened their safety, expressing a desire to kill the men if he had been there.
Right. So he sent some questionable text messages. We're going to be showing them on the screen and we're going to give you some context. Basically, she's on this cruise. You know how cruises are. People are partying, they're loud, they're having a good time. And basically, some guys were being loud near Ashley. And maybe they had a quick exchange back and forth while Doug is on the phone listening. And when he heard this in the background, he got really upset. And he went on this whole rant about how he feels that he can't protect her from guys. And he's worried that these guys are going to hurt her. And he started to dwell on it. Dwelling on it made him go into sort of a rage in his words. And he wanted to remove them from the earth, his words. And how she was easy prey for predators, especially because she was sweet and she liked to people please. And they could use that to hurt her, and how the guys arguing near her nearly put him into a sheer murderous mood. This was all his words, it's up on the text. And that was his description of how he felt, that he couldn't defend her. And Ashley would reassure him that she was fine, but he insisted there could have been a fight. And only being with her longer over time would remove the images in his head. And thinking about a guy doing anything to her made him explode with anger to take them out. So essentially, he wanted to kill these random dudes, right? He envisioned her with a bad person, with her legs spread, and a shitty person choking her out. And that haunts him. Yikes. But why would you play that in your head over and over again? I don't know. But he goes on to say that now he sees some douchebag on top of her effing her with her legs spread and him choking her out and effing her even more. This is what he's texting.
Right.
And he wants to literally go kill him. And Ashley told him not to think like that. And that's when he said, "You haven't seen my warrior side and you never want to." She tried changing the subject over text by saying, "Okay, let's not ruin the day." And he responded, "But kill the bad people." At first, I didn't know what to think about these messages because they sounded really odd without context. So it wasn't until the prosecution explained why Doug was talking about weird instances where her legs are spread. I mean, that would be weird in a moment with random guys on a cruise. That's not what it was about. This was about what Ashley had told Doug happened to her in the past, that she had been violated after he had heard about what happened to her. He hears these guys in the background. She's alone on this cruise, and he feels like he can't protect her if something goes wrong. So that's very interesting how things can look different once you have a full picture of why someone said something.
Yeah, I can see both ways. I can see how one would feel like he's being insecure and how another he's being protective. I don't know which side it is.
Well, then he explicitly told Ashley that God made her for him and that she belonged to him and that God created her to, quote, enjoy the beauty he did craft on earth. Now, that's a little bit odd. And these are actual text messages that were shown in court. He didn't appreciate the gaze of other men on the person that God designed explicitly for him. Ashley initially chalked this up to his protectiveness, and she even rationalized his behavior at the time. But then Ashley also would say things that showed that she was jealous about his wife who had passed away. I mean, isn't it bad enough that he lost his wife and that Eva lost her mom? But no, Ashley was insecure about the relationship that they had. And she wanted to make sure that Doug did not have feelings for his wife anymore, his former wife anymore. And that's strange to me. It's like, how can you remove your feelings for someone like that? It's kind of sad. In one text, he said, "I see Renee as Eva's mom and not my wife. It's strange, but there's no emotional connection." And you know what Ashley said? "Well, I'm glad. I just wish I could see it that way." Wow. And that really shocked me. That's odd because this is his deceased wife. It's not like there's anything for her to be jealous of. She doesn't exist anymore. She's gone. And with that, Doug responded with, "I know that we both have a battle we have to fight in our minds." And this was them having to push these images out of their head. Him with him being afraid of guys that are going to do something, and her with her insecurity that he still loves his wife that died. But I just want to also point out that this was just within weeks after they met, and they're already talking this way. But she told the jury that by the time she realized her husband was violent and unsafe, she was already pregnant, which again, could be true.
But this account doesn't align with Doug's version of events or his testimony under oath during depositions. According to Doug, the pregnancy was not accidental. It was something they both wanted, and he even underwent that vasectomy reversal to make it possible. And by this time, those troubling patterns in Doug's behavior had allegedly emerged.
Yet she still wanted to have a baby with him, and she wasn't leaving. But Ashley did file a restraining order for DV back in South Carolina, which was granted. That was the only restraining order she would ever be able to obtain against Doug. And Ashley just felt that the justice system had failed her. And to be fair, he started to do some other questionable things. So let's listen.
Ashley, did Doug admit to placing an illegal tracker on your vehicle?
Yes, in a message to me.
Did you report that to the police?
Yes,
What was the result?
no charges.
Were there incidents, Ashley, where Doug would appear unexpectedly?
Yes, a lot.
And how would that come about? Can you give us an example?
I'd be driving down the road and I'd see him in the rearview mirror, a couple cars behind me, or he'd be right behind me. Or sometimes he would show up at places that I was, just unexpected. I'd see him, or like in the parking lot.
And was this while you were living here in Manatee?
Yes, I was living here
And where was Doug living at the time?
in South Carolina.
How could he do that?
He was driving here.
Was this also during the time that the South Carolina injunction was in place?
Both then and after as well.
Did you report those incidents to the police?
Yes,
What was the result?
no charges.
Was there an incident with a neighbor, Ashley?
Yes.
What happened? Ashley,
She,
were you present
yes,
for the incident?
yes, he was outside in the yard at night looking in the windows of my house.
What is the neighbor's name?
Marianne Croft?
And was this reported to the police?
Yes.
Did they respond?
Yes, they came out.
Was it daytime or nighttime?
It was nighttime.
In your presence, was an identification made that it was Doug?
Yes.
What was the result?
No charges.
Was there an incident, Ashley, where you and your mother came home to find someone in the driveway of your home?
Yes.
Who was it?
It was Doug.
What did he do when he saw you?
He was on foot in front of the house, and when he saw us, he took off running.
Did you call the police?
Yes, I had to call several times before they sent someone out.
Did they take a report?
They did, but by the time they finally got there, he was long gone.
What was the result?
No charges.
I want to introduce what we've marked as Defendants Exhibit 23 and 24. You identify that?
Yes.
What does 23 show?
23 is a picture of Doug with his shirt off. He's like taking a selfie.
And is that how Doug looked at or about the time of the shooting on the 27th?
Yes.
All right, and what does the next exhibit show?
It's also a picture of Doug with his shirt off. He's working out. He's like doing like a push-up, I guess.
Does that too accurately represent what Doug looked like on the day of the homicide?
Yes.
Some of that is very frightening. If I turned and I looked at a car next to me and the person driving was someone I was scared of that I thought was like 3 states away, I would be terrified. And he was stalking her. And for a 54-year-old man Doug had a lot of muscle tone and he had the physique of a much younger guy, including a full 6-pack of abs. And why we're showing this photo to you that they showed the jury is to show that though 54 and some might see him as older, he was much stronger than Ashley. So this was to show the jury that Doug was a physical threat to her.
Ashley's attorney presented findings from forensic experts who had reviewed her computer searches conducted in May of 2020. Just 4 months before Doug's death. These searches included topics such as how to get along with an abuser, how to co-parent with an abuser, how to minimize toxicity with an ex-spouse for the benefit of a child. These searches, along with Doug's documented admissions of emotional abuse, physical intimidation, animal cruelty, and stalking, likely influenced the prosecution's decision to amend the charges against Ashley. While she remained charged with second-degree murder with a sentencing enhancement for using a firearm, the prosecution also added a lesser charge of manslaughter, also with a firearm enhancement. The prosecution, however, made it clear that they were not backing down from ensuring Ashley faced consequences for Doug's death.
Right, because with everything that they knew the defense would bring up that was factual about what Doug did, they wanted to give the jury a lesser charge to consider. Because they're like, wait, we might not get the second-degree murder. So like, well, we don't want to just totally get everything thrown out. We want to make sure there's a lesser charge just in case they believe that Doug was, exhibiting behaviors that were not good. And on cross-examination by the prosecutor, Ashley did not fare well at all. She had some very tough questions that left the jury wondering if Ashley didn't instigate or even manufactured the deadly encounter with Doug that led to his death.
So first, Doug Benefield never punched you ever, correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Doug Benefield never choked you ever.
No.
He never kicked you.
No.
He never pointed a gun at you.
He waved a gun in my direction.
But it was not pointed at you, correct?
It was pointed at me while he was waving it at me.
He never came at you with a knife.
No.
Or a club.
No.
Or a baseball bat.
No.
The prosecution was making an argument that Ashley had no reason to be afraid of her husband because, he didn't have any weapons around. But I have to disagree because your fist can be a deadly weapon. He's already harmed animals. We know the past. And even though he had never actually hit Ashley before, it doesn't mean he wouldn't have done it that day. The prosecution also showed a photo of Ashley following Doug's death, where she had some bruising to her eye and her face, and contrasted it with a photo taken shortly after, which doesn't show the same bruising. Ashley had testified that Doug would continuously call her really bad names that we can't say here and accuse her of flirting with other men, and this would enrage him and she would do it on purpose. That's what she claimed. However, the prosecution believed that most of their problems stemmed from Doug's daughter, Eva, and their 9-year age difference. And Ashley expected to just come in and be instantly loved by her, which wasn't the case. Let's just hear what she said Doug told Ashley about Eva.
At first, he had told me that she was really going to love me and that she was ready to have a woman in her life and that he wanted me to move in quickly because she needed a mom. So he made it sound like she also felt that way.
And you had no feelings of your own?
I was excited to get to be her stepmom.
And you gave her a shadow box right around this time, correct?
For Christmas, so it would have been in December.
All right. And what was the shadow box?
You want me to describe it?
Yes.
It was like a small picture. It had like deep sides and like the glass was at the front of it. And there was a sand dollar that I had painted and decorated. And I put it on like a black cardstock. And I wrote a saying on it that said something about how like you can be strong through the storms and that, seashells are beautiful things that come out of storms.
And that shadow box is the reason you were arguing that day with Doug, correct?
I know it came up at one point. I don't know if that was the reason.
And what was the problem with the shadow box?
Eva had taken it apart and I guess had thrown out the thing that I made and was using the picture frame for something else.
What was she using the picture frame for?
She had put a rose from her mom's funeral in it.
And that upset you pretty badly, didn't it?
It made me really sad. I'd taken a lot of time to make it for her, and I thought it was special. And
you began crying.
Yes.
And you dropped to the floor and sobbed hysterically.
Probably.
You were so upset that she put her dead mother's rose in the shadow box.
Right. It wasn't that. It was that she took it apart. I mean, I would have bought her another shadow box.
You went to Doug and said it was disrespectful that she took this apart.
According to Doug?
No, according to you. You went to Doug and said, she's acting disrespectfully. You need to handle her. She upset me. I'm crying.
I don't remember saying that about that.
Isn't it, in fact, what you were arguing about before this whole incident with the gun and the ceiling?
During this testimony, Eva actually stormed out of the courtroom. I was really surprised. But clearly, this was a heated moment, and I don't think Eva wanted to relive it. She was a teenager. She put a rose from her mother's funeral into the shadow box. And you know what? It was hers to do whatever she wanted to do with it. But then again, I can see why Ashley would be hurt, but to make a scene like that, that is way over the top. It's odd and it's childish, and it just shows that she was not good at controlling her emotions. Eva valued a rose from her mother's funeral over a seashell that Ashley gave her in the shadow box. So the purpose of the testimony was, of course, to highlight that Ashley was unable to show grace to a grieving teenager who valued a keepsake from her mother over her new stepmother. It's clear that Ashley took these things personally. Like, I think having a teenager myself, I know that you kind of just have to like forgive some of the things that they do because they're teenagers. They don't know better, but I don't think there's anything wrong with what Eva did. And she even created a TikTok video sharing the shadow box. And we can see that she used it to preserve this rose. She also showed some writing on the back, and I'm not sure if that was written by Ashley, but I just assumed it was since it was a gift from her. And it was Psalm 46:5 on the top, and then the verse was on the bottom. But the verse in the Bible is actually, God is within her, she will not fall. But when it's written on the box, it says, God is with her, she will not fail. But anyway, I just wanted you to see how pretty the shadow box was with the rose inside. I also collect roses from like funerals of my loved ones and happy moments too. And they mean a lot to me. So I think Ashley's reaction was definitely unwarranted.
The tough cross-examination questions continued. Prosecutor O'Donnell pressed Ashley about dating another man in the last year before Doug's death, during a time when Doug believed that they were exclusive and working on rebuilding their family. Ashley admitted to dating that man, but claimed it only began after she had told Doug he couldn't move in with her.
If you're still married, I don't know. Like I've never been in this situation, so I'm just speaking just from my thoughts, and I don't know anything about being separated or legally separated or any of those things. But I feel like if your divorce isn't finalized, I still feel like it's kind of jumping the gun to go and date other men.
I've never been divorced, but I can imagine it takes a while to do it.
Right,
and if
right.
everyone is on agreement about feelings.
If everyone's on agreement.
Exactly.
But that's not the case here,
Not
I
at
would say.
all.
And not when someone's telling you, oh, we're going to reconcile, we're going to be family again. Oh, now I'm dating someone.
Uh-huh. And she kept this from Doug because he was, in her words, possessive, controlling, manipulative, aggressive, and unpredictable. Ashley claimed that Doug found out about the other man because he had resumed stalking her. She denied wearing an engagement ring, explaining that Doug had overreacted to a ring she had regularly wore, mistakenly believing it as a symbolize for engagement.
Either way, she was still seeing another guy. But I also wanted to point out that at the same time she said she was living in fear and living the nightmare was also a time that she was posting pictures with Doug and friends. And the prosecutor asked her, were you living in fear in this moment? Were you living in fear in this moment? She kept showing pictures of, being happy and smiling in those moments. And Ashley was like, well, no, not in that exact moment. That was a good day. But remember, pictures do not really portray the truth anyway.
Are you scared here of Doug?
No, I would not say no.
You said on direct examination that around this time you were living the nightmare. Those were your words, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you living the nightmare here?
Oh, no, not at that moment, no. That was a very nice day.
How about at this moment?
Oh, it was a good day.
And states 102 at this moment.
Same. It was a good day.
I also wanted to add something from personal experience. And I think most of us can say that just because someone doesn't leave doesn't mean that the relationship isn't toxic. I think we've all been in a horrible relationship, but it's comfortable or it's complicated or you can't move because you're sharing an apartment. And there's so many reasons. And guess what? Even in bad relationships, there can be moments of laughter and fun. But we're not on trial for murder, so I think it's a little bit different.
I totally agree. There were also hundreds of texts exchanged between them in the weeks leading up to the killing.
Exactly. It looks like she was playing nice. She was making it seem like she was going to reconcile, but now it just looks like she was playing him, just trying to make him believe things were good between them so that she could get close enough to kill him.
There was even a video clip shown of Ashley, a friend, Doug, and Emerson at a restaurant together just a week before Doug was killed. In the clip, it looks like they're playing the game Heads Up. It's a charades-like game where one team gives hints to help the other person guess a word or phrase. In this instance, it was Real Housewives, though that detail isn't particularly important. What stands out is that everyone in the video was laughing, smiling, and seemingly having a great time together.
I can't believe this is a week before, so let's play this clip for you.
I think it's giving you clues that I gotta guess.
Is it like with words? I'd say not safe.
Get real?
Second word.
Real?
Working mother. Not a working mother.
Working mother, not a working mother?
Not a working mother. I live in a
Slum. Oh no, it's running out of time.
I live in a
House. Real house. Wife.
put together.
Housewives of. Oh.
And this video was taken the week before you shot him, right?
I don't know the exact date.
When was? I mean, in your mind, it was very close to the time, correct?
Yeah, I'm sure it was right around then. I don't remember when it was.
I have to say, that is pretty telling, and it's unbelievable that things can take such a turn. But then again, I keep saying this, but people can be quite different behind closed doors. And even I oscillate between thinking that some of this could be true, but then let's just hear the rest, including that I told you that she had 2 firearms in that bedroom of hers, one in a backpack that was hanging from the closet and another one that was in that bin on the shelf. And when they asked why it was there, she explained, and this did make sense to me once I heard it, and it could be also true, that leading up to this, she had taken everything out of her drawers in her bedroom. So now you got to think, you have a big dresser, your gun is in there, right? They took everything out and they moved a lot of it. And then some of the things were put on the shelf that she was still using. So technically your gun would be something that you wouldn't just like pack away in a box on a moving trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the one that was in the bag was what she would grab when she would go out where her gun was concealed. And she always had it in there.
The biggest moment was when the prosecutor asked Ashley to step down from the witness stand and stand in front of the jury to reenact the shooting between her and Doug.
This was similar to the moment where Sarah Boone was asked to come demonstrate how she zipped up the suitcase. You know, she was right there in front of the jury. Same here. The prosecutor had Ashley reenact the way that she moved, the way Doug supposedly moved. And this is what she said and did. Here's that now.
Judge, if I could have her step down so she can demonstrate how.
You may.
If you could just come down. So Doug opens the door and does what?
I'm standing in the doorway, kind of like this. He said, "Your fucking gun." And I held the gun out in front of me. I said, "Stop." We got into this like fighting pose where he like turned sideways. And he was like moving around with his like arms in his hands. And he started like inching forward towards me.
So he why do you call it a fighting stance?
He looks like a fighter. Like I don't ninja or something. I don't know.
Okay, so he's standing there. He turns to like this and starts moving his arms around.
Oh my God.
Well, show me. What was he doing?
You know, like, I don't know, he got like this, and he was like making like fighting motions. I don't know, I'm not a fighter, I don't know.
Okay.
It was scary.
Did he have his hands in fists?
Not at that point, they were like, I don't know.
Was he coming at you like this?
And he lunged at me, he came very quickly.
Okay, so he lunged. Was his fist up when he lunged?
I don't remember.
Okay. So you start shooting, and he does what?
He kept coming at me.
Okay, so then you keep shooting again. And he falls down on his back.
His legs went up in the air.
Okay, where do his legs go?
In the air.
How high in the air?
I don't know.
Do they go over his head?
I don't know, it's like his feet slipped out.
Okay.
And his feet and his legs went up in the air.
And were you still shooting at the time?
I don't remember.
You can have a seat.
That might have been hard to hear, but Ashley stated he looked like a fighter or a ninja or something. I don't know. And when asked to recreate his hand motion, this looked really funny to me, by the way. It's not a laughing matter, but definitely looked funny. She was like flailing around and she's like, I'm not a fighter. All I know was that it was really scary. And it looked like she was crying. But I think, again, I didn't really see tears. However, I do think it made Ashley seem more sympathetic. And it's actually very rare to have a defendant testify on their own behalf. When they do, it usually goes very badly. It also shows how meek she looks because honestly, she's a thin woman. She just carries herself kind of subdued. But then again, we know that she can act out. She can fly into a yelling match with Doug. She can tell cops what to do. The looks can be deceiving, right? Either way, despite the press describing her as a black swan / black widow, Ashley showed real moments of vulnerability and that she was fragile.
Either Ashley is an exceptional actress, or she was expertly coached, or maybe perhaps she was genuinely telling the truth. But it's up to the jury to decide.
Exactly. And I have so much to say, but I'm going to wait. The final defense witness was Bruce Ferris, a licensed mental health counselor and consultant in DV. Due to an objection from the prosecution, he could only speak in generalities. And that may or may not seem very fair, but it is what it is. He couldn't specifically give opinions on Ashley Benefield. Instead, he had to provide hypotheticals and his opinions on whether these scenarios mirrored the incidents that took place in the Benefield marriage. He agreed that shooting a gun into the ceiling, being cruel to animals, punching walls instead of faces like Doug stated, and placing a tracker on someone's car are all signs of DV, coercive control, and mistreatment. And that a person can still be a victim of DV with only emotional abuse. And I have to agree, and I'm sure a lot of you would agree as well, because it's true.
Absolutely. On cross-examination, when confronted with scenarios that mirrored when Ashley would apologize and take responsibility for Doug's actions, he stated that it could be, as he said, part of a strategy of minimizing to keep the peace. It doesn't negate the fact that the hypothetical person was still being mistreated or mean that DV didn't exist. To explain why Ashley could be posing in pictures with Doug or smiling and acting like everything was okay, he testified that victims will often implement defense mechanisms to make others believe that they are fine. He stated, quote, "We've all heard the term walking on eggshells. DV victims are trying to avoid aggression by their partner because they've grown to believe that there's a threat there." End quote.
Oh, and I also want to mention before we stop the defense's witnesses that the defense also recalled one of the state's witnesses. This was Jason Quittal. He was a mental health professional who provided marriage counseling and therapy to Doug. He testified that, quote, "Doug presented as someone who was domineering, and the terminology that I would use at times was super controlling. He was very dedicated to wanting the relationship to work, despite conversations with some of the disparaging things that Ashley had said to him." End quote. So wow, hearing that about Doug from a professional who actually treated him was interesting.
Now it's time for the closing arguments.
I'll go first with what the prosecution said. Prosecutor Suzanne O'Donnell told the jury that she wasn't trying to convince them that Doug Benefield was an angel, because he wasn't. He was an imperfect victim, but that doesn't mean he deserved to die. She told the jury that the murder had a purpose, and it was to accomplish a goal, which was Ashley's attempt to get sole custody of their daughter, Emerson. She said, quote, "This was a custody battle that this mother was going to win at all costs. The cost was the life of Doug Benefield, and that is murder," end quote. The thought of sharing her 2-year-old daughter with a man that she despised was unbearable for Ashley, and she would stop at nothing to attain her goal, and that this plan began even before Emerson was born. O'Donnell told the jury, quote, "When there was no other option, she shoots him and kills him and claims self-defense," end quote. She told the jury that Ashley's injuries were surface scratches and that Doug was never coming at Ashley when she shot him in cold blood.
Now for the defense attorney Taylor's closing. He told the jury that Ashley did what every law-abiding citizen would do if they had an abusive partner. She filed complaint after complaint after complaint, calling Doug Benefield's behavior to the attention of authorities with no results, over and over again with no relief. He told the jury that Doug was anything but a victim and was instead a very disturbed man, and that Ashley feared him and left a letter 3 years earlier telling him that she was scared of him. In that letter, she said she feared for herself and her unborn child. And fast forward, and now she fears for herself and their 2-year-old daughter. Ashley rejected him, and he would not take no for an answer. He asked the jury to find Ashley not guilty and return her to her daughter,
who only had one remaining parent at this time. And after 6 hours of deliberation, in what some were calling a compromise verdict, the jury found Ashley guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter with a sentencing enhancement for using a firearm. The lesser verdict indicated that the defense strategy effectively portrayed Ashley as a victim of Doug, and that he was dangerous and unhinged. And as the defense stated in closing, manslaughter in the state of Florida is defined as the killing of a person without intention or without malice, or with the intent that's extenuated by an acceptable defense, such as provocation or emotional disturbance caused by circumstances. All of that, in other words, just means you didn't intend, you didn't plan, you didn't, want to kill them, but because of the circumstances, you were put in a position where you had to. So it is kind of like the jury did buy her self-defense case in a way, but not to the extent that the prosecution wanted them to.
Right.
Because the prosecution wanted them to see it as second-degree murder. The judge immediately revoked Ashley's $100,000 bond and placed her into custody, and she was facing a sentence of 11 to 30 years behind bars. Meanwhile, after the trial, Eva made a statement to the media, and she stated that her dad finally got the justice that he deserved, and that Ashley could no longer hide behind the excuse that she was a victim of DV. Eva said she found it insulting that Ashley would try to get the benefit of being a victim of DV and get that self-defense claim. She told the press, quote, "I apologize to all women who have gone through DV situations. I think what Ashley was doing was unfair to them. They deserve justice, and I'm very happy that my dad got the justice he deserves," end quote. My mind keeps asking the same question, so I'm just going to say it. I just keep thinking, could there be a world where a man who we know has shown violence, because I truly believe that when he hurt the innocent animals, when he put a gun to his head, when he fired it into the ceiling, I've never done any of those things, and I don't consider myself a violent person. And if I saw somebody do those things, I would consider that violence.
Oh, yeah.
So is there a world where we can separate that from a person? Meaning, could Doug have been the kind of person who is violent, but wasn't domestically violent?
Rephrase that, because that is domestic violence, right? When you're disrupting someone's environment and like their personal space.
Right. So here's my thing. When people like Eva or other people in the media or just whoever, the prosecution says that she did not suffer from DV, I'm not sure I can stand with that. I think,
because it does sound like DV.
Right. That's my bigger question, because I have my own thoughts. If he indeed was a violent person, are we okay separating that from his partner and saying, no, he can be violent, but these things do not equate to DV? Like that's where I'm kind of back and forth, because if I was just hearing the story and I didn't hear what happened in the end, but it was just like, hey, there was two people, here's what he did versus here's what she did, and he admitted to it, I would be like, oh, that's DV.
The biggest thing is, like, she wanted to leave him so many times, but kept going back to him.
But that's what DV victims do, though.
Right.
That is one of the things they actually do.
But in my mind, the weirdest thing was it felt like she was gaslighting him. It felt like she didn't have intentions to leave. Like, do you know what I'm saying, though?
There could be an argument that you're afraid. Like, he came to other states and things like that. And she knew, like, oh my gosh, I'd rather just placate him because until I can figure out how to get away from him, right, I'm just going to pretend. Because we've done cases like that.
Right, of course.
Where the woman's very scared and they're like, I don't know how to deal with this guy. And her being younger, I'm not making it an excuse, but I'm just saying she didn't have a lot of experience, let's say, in these situations.
True.
Who does until you're in them? But another thing I wanted to say is that I don't fault Eva. First of all, this is her father. So if anyone was going to talk about my father or my family, you know, I'm going to have my perspective of what they treat me like, opposed to somebody I don't like, because she did not like Ashley from the beginning, and rightfully so, right? But on the other hand, I don't think you can necessarily know the situation between even your loved one and a partner, because that's a different relationship. So even if my dad, I'm just giving myself as an example, even if my dad treated me great and wonderful and he was an amazing person, that doesn't mean that he treats someone else the same way. So there could be a world where she didn't see every situation. And so she's still holding the belief, you know what? My dad never did those things. And I want to say, like, if we polled this community right now and we said, have you ever been in a situation where from the outside, everyone thought that so-and-so, fill in the blank, was a great person, but you knew otherwise?
Right.
We would say, of course, because that's what it is. From the outside, it is completely different. And I'm not trying to be insensitive because clearly we have a verdict, you know? They didn't believe all of Ashley's story. But I do think it reminds me a lot of cases like the Menendez brothers and even Sarah Boone, because let me finish before everybody says, like, what are you talking about? Let's say in the moment that someone is attacking you. So if Doug was definitely coming after her, in the Menendez brothers, if their dad was doing the harm in that moment or coming at them with a gun, those moments would warrant self-defense right away. Like, there wouldn't be a question. I would be like, oh, of course this was self-defense.
Right. There's a difference between revenge and self-defense.
Exactly. There's a difference between, okay, this person has mistreated me for many, many, many years or many, many, many times, and now I'm going to wait for a moment to retaliate. That's not really a self-defense claim. But, you know, there is battered person syndrome, you know, so it is hard. I mean, these cases are always going to be complicated. Ashley was actually just sentenced about 3 weeks ago on December 3rd. And wow, did she look like she had been through it. I mean, for her age, she looked like she aged 10 years or more. She had the dark circles under her eyes. And we're not going to get too much into this because there was basically like an entire sentencing hearing and you're allowed to have witnesses testify. And this is so that you can mitigate your sentence and so you can make it shorter, right? And it's almost like a tiny trial. I do want to mention one defense witness, and that was Dr. Barbara Russell. She's a doctor, a clinical social worker, and a psychologist for the past 15 years. And she actually interviewed Doug back in April of 2020. She only interviewed him for 90 minutes. But for someone like a layperson like us, we probably wouldn't be able to assess them, to diagnose someone, right? But in this kind of circumstance, professionals are taught how to look at a consultation or a person in much less time and come up with an expert opinion. So let's just play that for you now.
Would you tell us what that diagnosis was and your basis for it?
Douglas Benefield exhibited criteria that met the diagnostic categories of narcissistic and antisocial personality disorder.
And how, if at all, would that fold itself into being a potential abuser?
Well, the antisocial components, as well as the narcissistic components, he had little to no empathy. He really lacked the capacity to take responsibility for his behavior. He had a desire to be admired, to have constant attention. He felt very entitled and demanding to the attention and admiration of other people, whether or not he did anything to deserve it. And he had little regard for the rights of other people.
In Dr. Russell's professional opinion, she believed Ashley was in fear for her life and made a decision in that moment, doing what she felt was necessary after enduring compounding situations, knowing Doug was violent and she was afraid of him.
But this was also a special witness because Ashley lived with her and her husband. She actually lived in this woman's house, the psychologist's house, after the shooting. So it's kind of, you would all already know, like, okay, that looks a little bit biased, right? Like she's living with her. But she said this was actually good because she would get firsthand experience about how timid Ashley was, how many times she would say, oh, I'm sorry. And she was like doing this more in front of the woman's husband. So it really showed her that she was in fear.
The prosecution cross-examined Dr. Russell and brought up the fact that she only talked to Doug for 90 minutes. They questioned how it was possible to know or diagnose someone in such a short amount of time. But as Kimber mentioned, these are professionals and they're trained to assess someone fairly quickly. And those 90 minutes is a pretty decent amount to gather the necessary information. But still, the prosecution tried to argue that it wasn't enough time and there was more to that person's story.
I think anyone with a little bit of experience in life and a little bit of wisdom could give an opinion about somebody's nature, just being with them for, an hour and a half or so.
I agree.
Like you could say like, oh, they have, tendencies.
Because we've all been through experiences with people.
Exactly. The victim impact statements were, of course, emotional and all about who Doug was as a brother, a father, a cousin, and a friend. And I will add that this particular judge had very strict rules about impact statements.
The judge had a rule that you would have to talk about how the death impacted you personally and not bash Ashley.
Right. And this is what death sentences usually have. Like it's a more strict standard and it didn't seem to apply to this case, but he's like, I don't care. In my court, this is what impact statements are for. And they're not here to rehash the trial and talk about Ashley. And we're mentioning that because he had to stop family members a number of times and say, no, you can't go on bashing her. That's not what this is for. And that's kind of shocked me that he said that. Even the prosecution tried to argue otherwise. So let's play one of these moments now.
There's been no question in my mind or in this court under the stand your ground hearing, which was found that Ashley did not have a self-defense enough to reach that threshold, that she stole from Doug. There's no question that she killed Doug.
Judge, same objection. I'd ask the state to direct the witness to give appropriate victim impact.
Judge, I would disagree. It is allowed that the victim's family can make statements about the defendant. I understand if the defense is asking that they not, make broad
characterizations and opinions about the crime, the defendant, and the appropriate sentence shall not be permitted as part of the victim impact evidence.
I'll take care of that, Your Honor. I'll make sure.
Thank you.
And you're reading that from?
921.141 sub 8. How I started this sentencing hearing was, this is not a capital sentencing. However, when I do sentencings, I think those are good guidelines to use in formulating the nature and extent of a victim impact statement.
No problem, sir. I'll wrap it up and I'll be careful.
Sir, tell me everything you want to know. The victim impact evidence is designed to demonstrate the victim's uniqueness as an individual human being and the resultant loss to the community's members by the victim's death.
Yes, sir. I believe I've done that so far, and I'll finish it with that, sir.
The defense objected to Doug's cousin making a statement about Ashley, and the prosecution disagreed, but the judge made sure to clarify with the statute.
And like we said earlier, this didn't stop the family members from talking about Ashley, but again, the judge made it clear each time.
Even when Doug's daughter, Eva, made her statement, she went into that territory talking about Ashley. But it was a moving statement. It's always sad when a young person loses their parent. The defense tried to argue for a downward departure, which just means they were trying to argue for a lighter sentence due to mitigating circumstances. But the judge refused to downward depart. I was actually kind of surprised about that. And you could see Ashley looking defeated. But the jury did find her guilty of that lesser charge. We already know that. So let's now hear the sentence from the judge.
So when I look at the bases for the downward departure and I consider all of the facts and evidence that have been presented to me, my ultimate conclusion, Ms. Benefield, is that this is not a downward departure case. So with that said, the sentence of the court will be as follows. I'm going to sentence you to 20 years in Florida State Prison.
In the end, the judge sentenced her to 20 years and then 10 years of probation. again, I was shocked. I don't know why. I just think that people aren't getting away with things they used to, maybe. I mean, I'm seeing juries and courts kind of lay down the law. Like all the recent sentences to me have been warranted, but just like, wow, they're actually doing it.
But on the other hand, we just studied the case of Daniel Redlick.
Right. And that had to do with a stabbing. And I felt like that was so much more physical evidence in that case, but we don't want to ruin exactly what happened. But yeah, it was very opposite
to this.
Yeah. But that's it. You know, now she's behind bars. She lost a chance to see her daughter grow up, and no one really wins in cases like this.
That's right. Doug is gone. Eva lost her parents. Emerson lost hers. It's all sad.
And if anyone was wondering, Emerson is in the custody of Ashley's mother, Alicia. And the reason being she was the next of kin. And the child already knew the grandmother. She was, acclimated to that environment. And she had lived with her entire life. So it would have been a dramatic change to put her in the custody of like some random family member on Doug's side. So I'm just saying that, even though Doug's family did say they were going to try to fight for custody at one point, but I haven't seen anything move in that direction yet. So that's all. Please, of course, give us your thoughts in the comments section.
And thank you so much for watching today's video.
We'll see you in our next one. Bye.